I am here with a very, very special guest. I'm speaking with the Z-Man. A lot of people will recognize that name, but if you don't, do yourself a favor right now and check out the Z blog at thezman.com. You're going to find that updated daily with posts on a wide range of topics, including geopolitical events, war, sports, culture, tech, economics, whatever you could want. It's a great spot for content. He's also the host of the Z-Man Power Hour, located on that very same website and several other podcast syndication platforms. You can also check out his Substack for all these Substack guys who listen at thedissident.substack.com. And first of all, I'd just like to say thank you very much for taking the time, Mr. Z-Man.
Oh, my pleasure. Sorry for the boomer tech. I've been listening to Ramsey Paul too much. We're watching him fiddling around with his head.
Well, I was listening. One of the great joys in life is there's this great show hosted by Devin Stack called Black Pilled. And a common theme is that his internet is always going out. And so I'm starting to think technical difficulties are just one of the perks of being a Dissident Right content creator.
Yeah, I mean, I ran into this last week. I was I record my show on Thursdays. Usually it's Thursday, sometimes Wednesday night. Kind of depends. But I was prepared to do the recording, and we had a lightning storm here. And I have everything shielded. I'm usually pretty confident about this stuff. But I made the mistake of not running my Ether cable through a surge protector. And power surge went through it, hit my PC, fried a bunch of other stuff
that
was connected to it. And of course, that's the machine I use to do all my recording on. I'm like, oh, well, guess what? The show's canceled. Which, it's just part of life,
That's one of the few, I think, acceptable reasons for missing a show. It's like, oh, no, it was destroyed by God.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I've actually, why was I? This was a while ago. I forget. I was with Jared Taylor. We were on some sort of like live stream thing. And he and I were talking about something. And we suddenly realized that the host, his internet had gone out and he wasn't there anymore. And so we just filled like the rest of the show off. And then we said, well, we don't have anything else to talk about. But we couldn't turn the live stream off. So we just disconnected.
Same thing happened to me and my co-host who couldn't be here today, but we were on with this young guy named Jay Burden, who hosts a very, very popular show that I admire, but his internet went out, and then it was just us for like 15 minutes. I'm like, well, I guess it's our podcast now. We were just shooting the shit for everyone.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I mean, the thing about I learned about the podcasting racket, though, entirely by accident. In fact, the only reason I did a podcast at all is this Canadian guy. He was a radio guy, and he was getting into podcasting. This was 5 or 6 years ago now, maybe, something like that. And he hunted me down and said, I'd like to interview you. And I said, look, I don't have any audio equipment. I don't feel like going through the hassle. He goes, no, look, I will show you everything you need to do. It's real simple. If you just give me the interview. I'm like, okay. So, he walked me through, the basic stuff. And I've never been into audio. And it's not that hard. But so I did the interview, and I thought, okay. And he was a nice guy, and he's still kicking around. Kevin Michael Grace, I think his name is.
Oh,
like
cool.
And but anyway, it went up, and all these people started sending me emails saying, "Oh, I never thought you really sounded like that, and you have this radio voice, And it became a running joke that I sounded like I was on NPR or something. But so I thought, well, what the heck? Maybe I'll try a podcast. And what I learned, though, is that if it shouldn't be too professional. If it's too professional, it doesn't really work as well. And I noticed this on myself. I don't listen to the highly produced stuff. I want to listen to a guy who's, doing a history podcast from his office at the university.
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
You're trying to capture an electricity, and that's something we try to do on our show too. And you go astray when you're like, okay, I'm going to start building in these segments, and each segment's going to have a stinger, kind of like, daytime radio where it's like everything's blocked in. And when it's more free flowing, you could actually have fun and kind of wander into areas you wouldn't be familiar with. But then the flip side of that is a lot of people who stream now just bullshit for 9 hours straight. I'm like, okay, well, we can't just do that. The show can't just be me reading the news and then people pay me money. That's the far end of that.
Yeah, there is definitely a middle ground there. One of the things that I figured out, I was doing the segment business because John Derbyshire was probably the first conservative podcaster ever.
Yeah.
And he does that. He does segments, and he has this little bell he rings. And so I thought, well, what the hell? It worked for him. I'll give it a shot. I used to do that, but it was a lot of work. And then one day, I don't know what I was thinking. I didn't have a lot of time, so I just turned on the mic and I said, okay, I'm just going to talk for an hour. And I got a bunch of people saying, you know what, you should do it that way. That's much better. And I'm like, there you go.
Yeah, follow your interest. If something, once you trust that, if this is interesting to me, it's going to be interesting to other people. And I will caution you against going down the sound effect and post production road, because on our show, that I've gone insane with the amount of sound effects that I start dropping in and playing around with, and with background music. And it's kind of like getting a tattoo. Soon you're going to start getting shit on your face and neck if you start putting in like air horn sound effects and stuff.
Yeah, I played around. I use Audacity, and what I did is I take out the breathiness, the sound of breathing, and I figured that out. I can actually see my own. I can see my ums. I can see, I can see all those little ticks that we all have.
Yes. It'll drive you crazy. It'll drive you crazy once you start seeing your little imperfections visually in front of you.
And what I figured out is that I know what they look like. I do a 3 or 4 minute little talk at first, just off the top of my head. It has all of those in there, and then I just do the remove tool, and it's good enough. It doesn't have to be any better than that. So it takes a good 5 minutes to do. But yeah, I used to really try to edit the thing and all, and the thing is, no one appreciated it, so the one time I just turned on the mic and talked for an hour, and people liked it better. Like, there's the lesson. I'm putting all this work in trying to make myself happy about a product that people just want to hear what I have to say. They don't care if it's a little weird,
Yeah.
Weird.
As long as the audio quality is good, and yours is good. And that's why I recommend your show to people, because it's it's not like choppy and staticky. And also it's just an hour long. And again, I'm the worst for this, because our episodes are like 4 hours long. But an hour is actually a nice, convenient chunk of time to get an idea across,
Yeah, I figured out. Well, first of all, I'm usually, after about an hour's worth of talking, I get far less interesting than I am in the first hour. But the other thing is, too, is you start to get tired, and I think people also have a cap. About an hour is what they're willing to tolerate. Because you think about what people are doing. They're in the car. I can't tell you. There's it's always funny. The women always tell me that they listen to me either taking a walk or going to sleep, which is kind of always makes me laugh. That was Jared Taylor's wife years ago. I met her for the first time because I think they were just engaged at the point, something like that. But anyway, she says, "Oh, I recognize your voice. I listen to you while I go to sleep at night." And I just started laughing. I'm like, okay, I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean, but if I'm putting you to sleep, well, good for me, I guess.
You learn a lot about your ideas by seeing who likes your ideas and what audience that appeals to. And, I always like podcasting because I was always a radio guy growing up. I liked radio. I liked like Howard Stern, Opie and Anthony, things like that. And the joke with them was like they were really big with truckers, long haul truckers. And I don't know if that's what they liked, but it just ended up so all the guys who call in were truckers. And I noticed with our show, interestingly enough, a lot of our audience is in the UK. It's in Europe generally, but there's a lot of British and a lot of Irish people. And because we're a Canadian show, and we oftentimes discuss Canadian news. Almost no Canadians listen to this show. It's all Americans and Europeans.
It is the weirdest thing. I have a few Canadians in my readership I know about, but when I looked like on the site, I can break out where the IP origins are, and even with VPNs and stuff, you can generally get an idea as to where your readership is. And I have a whole bunch of people in Europe. Like 15% of my readership comes out of Russia, oddly enough. But I have more Finns in my readership than Canadians.
We got so many Finns too.
Yeah. Well, first of all, they all speak English. And their English is fantastic. And there's actually some of my stuff gets translated into Finnish. So because one of my readers has a Finnish site, and I tell him whatever you want to do, and he just translates some of this stuff for his site. And I guess it's because I've been to Finland and I've said nice things about Finland. It's a small country, so they're like, "Hey, this guy, he's okay. He's a good guy. He likes Finland." So But I mean, it makes sense. It's kind of like when someone says something nice about, Rhode Island, or maybe like if you're in Canada, Nova Scotia. If you say something nice about the Nova Scotia, then you're going to have all of them on your side.
Yeah, that's the biggest way to get a Canadian on your side is to notice them, because Canadians have. It's strange. I don't like to get down on Canadians too much because the Canadian fans I do have, they are very, very patriotic. But I notice with a lot of kind of lay Canadians is they're very insecure and they love being held up, and that kind of guides the Canadian foreign policy, in my opinion. I'm sure you're aware of Justin Trudeau, and a lot of people don't like Justin Trudeau. I actually think Justin Trudeau's good in the sense that he's very, very stupid, and he would do a lot. A lot more damage would be done if we had a competent person with his political persuasion. As it stands now, everyone kind of knows he's dumb, and so he can't really accomplish too much. But one thing about the Canadian, and every politician I know currently is like this, is they're desperate to be recognized on the world stage. And if you look at what the Canadian government does, year over year, it's always trying to like be the leader of some global movement. Because we want to be taken seriously. We want the UN to, give us a headlock and tussle our hair. And, it's very insecure. And that's bothered me more than anything about us on the world stage, at least.
You see that a lot with Europeans too. It's like the Finns used to be pretty sane about this stuff, but like the Danish, I don't care. I don't give a crap at all. You watch a Danish, like I was in Denmark. I like watching the Danish public affairs shows. They're concerned about the pothole on 12th Street. Europe, who cares? We're surrounded by idiots. We're not going to pay attention to them on our, in our time. It's a very, very strange thing. But on the other hand, like the French, their French political class, they're always looking for some reason to pretend that people care about the French political class. And of course the Finns are, they got that goofy woman. What the heck is her name? The bimbo they have as a prime minister. Yeah.
Are we? Is that Santa Marin woman? Or
that's it. Yeah. And but it is. You see a fair amount of the Europeans that sort of, it's sad what's happened to them. They should hate America because you can kind of understand the America-Canada thing because let's face it, Canada's smaller than the United States, and so you're always going to have that sort of big brother, little brother thing going on. They're perfectly reasonable. It makes total sense. But the Europeans should be looking at North America and saying, look, that's just still a savage land. We just forget about this people. But they're not. They want to be us so bad. And it's sad. I mean, I do find it. I'm going to Europe. Well, next month I'm going to be in Europe. I'm going to be in the Baltics and then Slovakia. And I guarantee that every cab I'll be in, every train I'll be in, they'll hear I'm an American and they want to tell me about Joe Biden.
Yeah, well, and that's a phenomenon that I have not had much exposure to because I haven't traveled as much as I'd like to. The COVID vax mandate really threw a wrench in that. That's why I haven't been able to get to America because I didn't get the vaccine. Hopefully I can soon. But, I would hear stories about, people who go to Russia, go to Latvia, go to wherever it may be, and they have got an encyclopedic knowledge of American TV and American culture. And they got very, very strong opinions about, Tucker Carlson or, and sometimes I forget, I'm like, the American cultural machine, there's the story I've told before. I forget. I'm going to butcher it, but it was, it might have been Edward Dutton or something, but he was in a cab in this sort of third world country in Eastern, not maybe third world, but somewhere in Eastern Europe. And it was very run down. Maybe it was Estonia. I don't know. But he was in the cab. And all around him is poverty. All around him is, children in rags. And then, the guy learns that this individual is American, and he turns around and he said, I want you to know that I feel very bad about the poverty crisis in America, because he watches the news and America, all they know is about America is poor, and they see ghettos and stuff. And these people are eating their fucking boiled shoes, but they're always within the context of that media. And that's just, it's a mind-blowing thing to be exposed to, I think.
Yeah, I when I first started going to Europe, it was really strange how much they knew about. Because let's face it, I'm just a dumb American. We always assume, this is true about Americans, we just assume that we don't know anything about the world. We're a bunch of clodhoppers from, the wilderness. we just assume this, and so you go to Europe and you just expect it to be full of sophisticated people and all this, and instead they're all talking about and the first cab driver I'm with, he's, oh, you're from America, he wants to talk to me about American politics, Barack Obama or something, but it's funny how much they consume our content. I was in Ireland, in Dublin, and I was waiting for some people, some friends. So I went into a pub and we were going to meet there. And there was, I don't know, 3:00 in the afternoon or something. And there was 3 or 4 younger guys, and they heard me, so they walk up and go, oh, you're a Yank. And I said, yeah. And so we talked a little bit. And the guy says, well, what part of America are you from? And I said, Baltimore. And they started whispering to each other. And the guy looks at me and goes, that's impossible. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, you're not black. So I pulled out my driver's license and I showed them, and I had my driver's license. I said, see, it says there right there. And they're like, how's that possible? And it hit me. What they knew about Baltimore was from the TV show The Wire.
Exactly.
So they just assumed that that's what it was. And I'm like, I mean, it is kind of like that, but it's not, I don't live in the ghetto. And that was hilarious.
Same thing with me too. Like as a Canadian, until I've looked into it more recently, obviously. But when I was growing up, Baltimore, you would know, #1 most violent city in America, black majority population, and you equate those two as like, oh, that's just a black city that's shooting each other. And you do forget that it's a city with lots of different. There's nice areas of Baltimore, right?
Yeah, and well, of course, I had some fun with these guys. I said, oh well, you get used to it. Everyone carries a gun. And, there's certain times of day where there's more gunfire than others. And I was just, having a good time with it. And they had no idea. They had no frame of reference to be able to qualify what I was saying. So, I was laying it on thick. But, in Baltimore is what it is. I mean, it's like St. Louis. One of my readers, and I've met him and his wife at events. He's a really great guy. And he's in St. Louis. And so we have this kind of friendly competition as to who's going to have the most murderous year. And, it is a dangerous place, and there are things that you have to be careful of, but there are, nice places too. But
let me ask you this, as someone who, just knows Baltimore from the stuff I've heard in my disjointed schizophrenic chats that we're all a part of, is there a crash course in Baltimore? What can you tell us about Baltimore that might surprise people or highlights your experience living there?
Well, I mean, the city has some extremely beautiful architecture. It's an old city. Baltimore was around, at the very beginning. It has all the history that America has. There's places for the Revolutionary War. Hell, out in the western part of the state, there's, things for the French and Indian Wars, and, you got, of course, the War of 1812. Obviously, the Star Spangled Banner, American anthem was written there, and right in the middle of Baltimore. And the Civil War, of course, there's tons of stuff happening. It's a place that's full of history, but it's also full of great architecture, some beautiful Federalist architecture. And sadly, it's in some of it's in really dodgy neighborhoods, but it is absolutely beautiful. It's a city that you drive around in and you think, you know what? It shouldn't have to be this way. Somebody with some pride who had some sense that this is my home and my place and had real power would clean this up in a hurry. And, but, you're not allowed to do that. But it has a lot of charm to it in a lot of ways. And it's a kind of a tragic place, I think, is a way to think of it, because it doesn't have to be this way, but it is. And it's a victim of things that I don't think anyone could have done anything about. In 1955, the city was like 19% black, and it had very low crime. People felt safe. It was it was a productive city. I mean, lots of jobs, a lot of pride. But then it tipped over in that 20% range. And then what happens is a funny little bit of statistics. Because black on white crime is such a lopsided thing, it's 8-10 to 1, something like that. So, in other words, for every one white on black crime, there'll be 10 black on white crimes. Well, what happens is that as the black population grows, the number of people who know someone who was a victim of black crime skyrockets. And it's that sense, even though you may not have been a victim of crime, people who were, and more and more people who were. So you get this sense that, hey, we got to get out. And that's what you had, this huge white flight. And of course, there was a very large Jewish population here. So you had a Jewish flight out of the city into the west side. And so like some of the really hardest thumping neighborhoods will have old broken down synagogues in them.
Well, it's funny that I remember reading about this a few years ago, and we covered this on the show with, I believe it was Bowling Alone, that book, and it goes into detail. I'm pretty sure it was that book, but you can track over time. There is that, like you had said, that 20% tipping point where once a community reaches that, it actually triggers a flight and it accelerates towards whatever that growing minority is. And you see that all across America.
Yeah, I had a friend who lived out in the West Side, inner suburb, and it was a nice, single family homes, townhouses. He was in a townhouse, he and his wife, and this was, they were getting ready to have kids, so they were looking to, buy a single family house, but they liked the neighborhood, and he had like one black neighbor, and then all of a sudden, all the houses went up for sale, and it turned completely black. He was like the last white guy to leave.
Last of the fucking Mohicans.
It was amazing. And the funny thing is like all of his neighbors were Jewish, except for the one black guy and him. And I said, see, the problem you had is that you didn't go to the meeting. They had a meeting and they didn't invite you. And he laughed. But, it seemed like what it was. But I mean, it very well, who knows. But it was pretty funny, though. I mean, it was just instant, though. It wasn't funny for him. But.
Well, what's interesting is there's this other book we talked about on the show, and you're probably aware of it because you did a lot of sort of that James Burnham related stuff, which we'll get to in a little bit. But it's this book called Exit, Voice, and Loyalty. And the main thrust of that book is it studied sort of the exodus of talent from highly successful firms. And what it noticed was, but it was in firms, but it was also in communities. So what they noticed was whenever something is going wrong in an organization or a community, that and maybe this is also the Pareto principle, something I know you talked about that recently on your show as well, but it's like the top performers and the most intelligent people are always the first to leave. And there's something about the most dialed in, intelligent people where just statistically, they tend to be the ones who don't stay and change things. They just run. And the moment and once they smell danger, they're the first to run. Then the high quality people leave. And this is very evident in school districts. So, once you start some busing programs, the smartest families are going to leave. And now all you have are like the new kind of lower classes and almost the lower end of the people who were there before. And that's all you have left. And those people, the united thing about them is they tend not to advocate for themselves. The types of people who would advocate seem to rarely do that.
Yeah, it is, and it's funny to bring that up in the corporate space because I have observed that myself. I've been a part of that myself, and it's actually happening at a wholesale level. I think I've talked about this as the crisis of competence. And look, I've been busy for the last 3 years where I can't really take a vacation or anything like that. I mean, when I go, like I'll go to Europe for this kind of stuff, and I will bring work with me. I will work on the road because I can work anywhere. And the reason is that, I mean, I turn down business, and the reason is that finding competent people, you can find people, that's easy, and you can find people who are mediocre and doing slightly above average, but finding people who are competent and who have any kind of interest in doing work well is becoming increasingly difficult. And no one knows what to do about it. It's there's always these theories. Well, we didn't train these people. We didn't do this. But there's something else seems to be going on, and I think it's the environment of the corporate world is so weird that you don't want to. The first, I know I've seen this at like one of my larger clients that started doing the DIE stuff, the diversity, inclusion, and equity business.
Yeah.
Anybody who had a clue disappeared. I mean, they were instantly gone. I was like, what the hell's going on here? I thought maybe they were getting bought out or something. And then I got an email from their HR people saying, well, even though you're not an employee of ours, we still need you to do your DIE statements and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, all right, I know what happened now. And, the funny thing is I told them, nah, I'm not going to do that. And, they were going to cancel my contract. I said, okay, I don't care. Just cancel the contract. And finally somebody stepped in and said, we can't lose everybody. We can't run our company like this. And I think that's, it's a problem that people don't appreciate so much is that, the combination of the population getting dumber and older and, all these baby boomers, everybody pisses and moans about the baby boomers, but there's a lot of smart people in that group. And once they retire, they take that intelligence with them and they're not being replaced by, the unicorn who floated over the Rio Grande, named Jose, who's who miraculously going to fill their position. So it's that thing you describe about the competent exiting. I think we're probably going to see that much more often because at some point, the market adjusts and says, all right, well, these guys can charge a premium.
Yeah. And also, I think there's a bit, and you talked about another thing that I'll get to in a second, but I think what had happened was that entire, because no matter what, there's going to be a sort ranking of the most capable and intelligent and disciplined. Discipline's what a lot of people don't talk about. Intelligence is one thing, but intelligence plus laziness doesn't help you. Intelligence plus discipline is very good. But I think there's a poisoning of that sort of upper class where they've been taught that having loyalty to any organization is a fool's game. So I don't know, maybe this started in the 90s or something, but I know it's part of my generation. Like the expectation, and it's on both ends because no one feels that they have job security on one hand. On the other hand, they feel like, well, I'm not going to show any loyalty to this company because they don't show loyalty to me. So I'm always looking for I've always got my eye on the exit. And so these people they behave like consultants. But if you don't have the highest performers willing to truly invest themselves in an organization, they're always just this free floating entity that doesn't make the organization better. And, they're always moving around. And I don't know if there's a way to kind of go back to how it was where people felt like they were invested in not only their job, but also their location as well. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think, it's this managerial ethic, in smaller firms where the owner is there, it's a vastly different dynamic than in larger firms where ownership might be there, but they're not really a part of the day-to-day operations. My larger clients, I mean, I deal with some global clients too. And when you deal with those people, it's a miserable existence because there is no sense of ownership. There's this weird managerial culture, and you're ruled by rules, and no one could quite be sure where the rules come from. But in a smaller firm where the boss is there, and the rules come from him because they're his rules, it's a much different environment. It's you can see that people who go from the big machine to smaller companies, it's almost as if they can breathe again because now you can walk into somebody's office and say, I have a problem.
Absolutely.
And
That's my work experience as well, because I've worked at very, very large advertising agencies before, and I've worked with very, very large clients before. And my life was so much better once I started working with small businesses or medium-sized businesses, where I can speak with the primary stakeholders one-on-one. I'm not dealing with this whole web of intermediaries. I'm not dealing with someone whose job is to make my life difficult, that some liaison who just doesn't like that they got to talk to me. And so, yeah, I feel that.
yeah, I think it's this whole the whole concept of managerialism, which it's funny that a lot of people have written about, but people haven't written and talked about it as much from a cultural perspective because it's an attitude in a way. It's like being in a large bureaucracy. There's what the heck was the guy's name? Jerry Purnell, the great science fiction guy, writer. He had this iron law of bureaucracy. He said, there's two kinds of people in a bureaucracy. There's people there who actually care about getting work done, and then there's people there who only care about the bureaucracy, managing the blob. And those people always end up running the blob. They run the machine. They run the whole thing. They make all the rules, and all they care about is what the internal stuff is going on. And that's as a part of this sort of aesthetic that's in the managerial culture, is that no one really it's weird in a way, but doing things actually becomes a detriment. I said this about Trump. One of the things that people did not appreciate about Trump is that when he goes to Washington, all of a sudden you have all these people who are confronted for the first time in their life by someone who's actually had a job, who actually had done something in his life. And it was just weird. I spent a fair amount of time in Washington. This is something and I see this in a lot of larger companies too now. You never ask someone what they do. In Washington, you never ever ask someone what you do. You don't say, well, what do you do? Because, they don't do anything. You ask them, where are you with? Where are you with? Who are you with now? That's what people say.
It's like a question nobility would ask themselves, like, what's your affiliation?
Yeah, yeah, it's the same kind of thing. It's because who these people are is defined by this network of relationships. Look, feudalism worked this way. So it does have a feudal aspect to it, in that these people are defined by these horizontal and vertical relationships that show up on their resume. I've always threatened to do a show by just going through LinkedIn and pulling LinkedIn resumes and reading them. Because I've done shows like I used to do this thing called Zero Science, where I would read papers from the grievance sciences. I would just read the abstract from it. And people thought I was making it up. I mean, but I was just reading what was there. I take some credit for somewhat popularizing the term "people of uterus" and "people of penis," because "people of uterus" actually started in a paper written in Sweden, and they used the term "people of uterus" to distinguish them from women who did not have a uterus or were not in fact women. And so I started joking. I started calling them people of penis, but anyway, but I've actually now started hearing people use people of uterus, so I'm going to take credit for popularizing it, even though it's not really that true.
It's a common enough thing on the internet, and especially the distant right, where what starts as our sarcasm just becomes, punishable law later.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, there's a shadow culture that I don't think our side quite appreciates, but you see it. People who watch Tucker Carlson from our side will notice this stuff. I know he pays attention, and his writers certainly pay attention to the content on this side of the divide. But you see other people too. They'll pick this stuff up. Normie sort of mainstream people, they pick this stuff up and they try to use it themselves. And sometimes it's hilarious when they don't really know what they're doing. And we have probably more influence than we realize over the general culture, which we're probably better off we don't realize it.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I was thinking about this just the other day, because a lot of the stuff we complain about, like, oh, there's not a lot going on online, or so it feels like, there's not a whole lot of interesting sites. There's not a lot of, stuff to tune into, but you start thinking, what do celebrities do? What do they browse around with? Because they're not just reading the news every day. Like, they're playing games under some fake name. These politicians, there's always this idea that's, we're always thinking the feds are watching us, and they are. But I'm like, there's probably, maybe not some of the older guys, but there's young guys logging on and checking out 4chan. There's no doubt in my mind there's a lot of people just seeing what's going on in 4chan. And then probably within our ranks, because if you listen to the news, what's going on over here sounds terribly interesting. Wouldn't you want to check in to see what all these schizophrenic, these crazy new ideas, where they're coming from? Because what they're not doing is watching Stephen Colbert, because nobody is. I'm convinced no one's watching Jimmy Fallon anymore.
Yeah, none of this stuff. It's weird. Years ago, I pointed out to someone, it was just one of those things that just kind of popped into my head. This was probably 10, 15 years ago. I said to someone I was chatting with, I go, when was the last time someone sent you a link to National Review? And he thought for a second. He goes, I don't remember. I go, yeah, I mean, nobody does. Because no one's reading this crap.
Yeah.
And I figured out. I actually had this little inside information. When they shut down the Weekly Standard, which had, I think, a $6 million a year budget, the rich guy finally pulled the plug on it. They had about 60,000 readers a month they were getting. I get 300,000 readers a month.
Yeah.
So and I don't have a $6 million budget. And I found that out. I'm like, this is unbelievable what goes on. I mean, and I stopped paying attention to a lot of this stuff as a result. I'm like, why waste my time? No one else is reading this. And, I go hunting for material in weird places now. I mean, it's much more interesting to write about some lunatic than, because at least, I mean, the lunatic, if they're genuinely a lunatic, at least they're living their life genuinely. They're genuinely crazy. The people who are faking it in the mainstream. I always wonder, how do you live with yourself working at the Washington Post, where pretty much what you do is you fill in the blanks. Here's the story we're writing. This is the narrative. You go call this guy, get some quotes, and fit them in the third paragraph. I mean, it must be an awful way to live.
Yeah. One character that we always bring up on the show, because I just want to keep in touch with them, is Brian Stelter, formerly of CNN. And I just loathe him with such a preoccupied rage. But I always look at him and I'd say, how does it make you feel? Like, you must know that Alex Jones is so much more popular than you. And I bet if we polled America right now, even the people who hate Alex Jones, they would like Alex Jones more than anyone who's working at MSNBC. Like, like you were just saying, like you get like 300,000 people. I'm like, that number you've got is bigger than the entire circulation of probably some high-end newspapers too, like Time Magazine. I bet you got more of a readership
Yeah.
than Time fucking Magazine. And Alex Jones is without question bigger than Larry King, bigger than, no one's going to be as big as like Carson at his peak, right? I get that. But like post Carson, when things started to fracture, like Alex Jones is so goddamn influential, and that must drive them insane.
Yeah, I mean, and I think there's a big part of it. I think there's a lot of the censorship that's gone on is driven a lot by just petty jealousy and envy, because at some level they do know. Here's a good story that relates to that. And I'll get to pat myself on the back a little bit here, but I went to Yoram Hazani's first event down in Washington, D.C. That was about 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. And one of the speakers, she had to get, she had to let him know that I was okay, So I show up, and it was a hilarious event. I mean, I got a ton of great material out of this, but I'm there, and one of the strange things that happened, the first night's Friday night, I'm at the bar, I'm having a few drinks with someone who was an academic who was there, and who I knew. But he's like, hey, look, hope you don't mind, but if somebody finds out who you are, I'm going to have to pretend I don't know you. I'm like, I understand, And so we're chit-chatting, and there's a couple of people kind of orbiting around us, younger people. And finally, they catch my attention, and they walk over and they go, look, I hate to interrupt you, but I recognize your voice. Are you the Z-Man? And I start laughing. I'm like, yeah, it's me.
I thought you were walking around with a name tag that says the C-Man.
Yeah, so, well, but this started happening. People like, oh, yeah, I recognize your voice, or I heard you were here. And so, okay, I found out it's true. There's an underground community in DC that listens to outlaw material. I found out that they actually have like a Friday night get-togethers where they'll listen to podcasts and drink beer and shoot the breeze. And they have to do it, in private because of fear of, what could happen. So that was rather interesting. But the best part is that Rich Lowry was there. And he and I are standing kind of similar to each other, or near each other. And this person walks across the hallway, with this air of recognition, looking right at us. And Lowry, it just assumes this person's walking over to them, instead walks over to me. and he was so deflated. He was just, oh my goodness, And I just laughed. I mean, it's like, I mean, first of all, this sort of minor celebrity stuff. I mean, it's flattering, but I can live without it. It doesn't matter. I mean, I'm flattered that people walk up to me and feel like they need to say something nice, and I appreciate that. But I'm never been a person who ever really had any interest in being famous. But everybody in that room was just desperate for people to recognize. I'm like, man, what a lousy way to live. I mean, it was just, I don't know. I couldn't live that way.
Well, there's something invigorating about an entity like yourself who really, bootstrapped it, for lack of a better term. Like, you never actually had to play the game, wheel and deal, sell out your principles. You actually you did something on your terms, which is something that none of them were able to do. And sometimes they give it a shot. Like a lot of these industry guys, these yes men, the talking heads we're talking about, once they try and start their own podcast, it crashes and burns, because it turns out all they know how to do is appeal to authority. They don't know how to work laterally. They don't know how to be in a room and gather people around them, which you think they'd be able to do being on TV or radio or wherever else. So you got a guy like yourself who actually pulled this audience towards you in a lateral way rather than selling out to some machine. I sound like an anti-establishment guy right now, but like, you know what I mean though, right? You didn't have to like make a deal to get where you're at.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that none of these people have ever had jobs. When you live out in the regular work world, no matter what you do, whether you don't have to be in the sales side, you could be in the accounting department. One of the things you realize is that the business exists because of customers. So you better have a product that could appeal to an audience. That's how it has to work. And when I started doing this, I said, you know what? I know there's lots of people out there who have my opinions about things, generally speaking. And I don't see people out there writing the kind of stuff I would want to write. So I'm going to write that and see what happens. I started getting an audience. I'm like, aha, I've been confirmed in my suspicion. I'm going to go ahead, and this is going to be my niche. This is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to have my audience. But that was all stuff I learned in the business world. That's just how it goes. I mean, in lots of products, you don't know if it's going to move or not. You don't know if it's going to work or not. And when it does, you go, aha, this is right. And these guys in the punditry world, they have one customer. It's the same guy who is the customer for CNN is the same guy who's the customer for Fox News and all the other ones. So it's the selection pressure is all for the obsequious rump swab, the guy who just knows how to court power. And when they get out into the world, they have no idea how to actually function. They're like children in a way. And I think a lot of them, I've used to make this point about the National Review crowd, that if they actually had to go out and earn their keep, like, as a blogger or something like that, they'd all starve to death. They wouldn't last a month. They would run out of food and water, and they'd be out on the streets because you just don't know. And it gets back to what we talked a little bit about before we got started, is that not having a job stuff, not actually being in the work world. It's become this huge dividing line between people.
Yeah, and right before the episode started, I wanted to get back to this because a very interesting thread to pull on. One thing you had pointed out, and this is something that I think was pointed out, I think, in Revolt of the Elites by Christopher Lasch, and in a sense pointed out in the Bell Curve as well. And I don't know why I keep thinking about these two books a lot lately, because I see it run its course, especially when I get into like Edward Dutton. He talks about the sort of bifurcation of this IQ in society. But they're talking about, America, let's say the 50s, 40s, that area, you would have a factory. And within that factory floor, which is a common enough experience for people, you would have a lot of cross interaction between different classes, different, not really ethnicities, but like, there's sort of intragenerational and intra-class interaction. Furthermore, and people would sometimes decry this as manipulative, but the idea of like the boss marrying his secretary or something like that, which is frowned upon now, but back then that's what that actually is class mobility. You got a poor person marrying into a rich family. And so now you see entire families start to kind of move up, move down, but there's no stratification there. People are actually surrounded by each other and interacting with each other. So you couldn't distance yourself. And Revolt of the Elites, if I recall correctly, was about how these days you have this sort of high performance upper class, like we were talking about before, that has zero interaction with anyone else. A law firm, for example, like the highest, they don't talk to the cleaning staff. They don't talk to anyone. They just exist in that, $300,000 a year world. And they never interface with anybody else. And that's a problem first, irrespective of race. That's a problem of, even in all white society, that would be a problem.
Yeah, it's a very big. It's one of those things I never really thought too much about, because it's one of those things when you come along in the world, the world is just what it is. You don't examine it closely. You just take it for granted. And look, I grew up very poor. But, I even at a young age, I was around people who were not poor. And I understood there's a difference between being poor and being poor, if you get my drift. You could conduct yourself in such a way. And it was good to be around, other kids and see how they lived. It was a motivation for me to say, hey, you know what, you could just better yourself. If you imitate these people, well, you kind of are those people. It's not that hard, you had that opportunity with lots of examples around. I wasn't the only guy like this. I grew up with guys I still know to this day who grew up working class, poor, and bettered themselves and got into the middle class. But it was because you had that experience with it. But it works the other way too. People who have never been around poor people, have never been around working men, they have no idea how to talk to them. I don't understand it. There's a veil of ignorance between those two sides. And that's probably worse than poor people not knowing how the upper half lives. A society can function fine if the poor people don't really know what's really going on in the rich people's homes. But those rich people better damn right know what the hell's happening in the ghetto. They got to know this, because you can't be a ruling class without knowing that. And you really see this. You hang around Washington, D.C., it's a giant outdoor daycare center for people who are wildly over-credentialed, who have this absurd sense of confidence in themselves, yet They're wildly ignorant of what's all around them. They can't talk to you about the rough neighborhoods in Washington because they just avoid them. They don't go there. They don't even drive through them in the daytime. They don't know any of these people, and it really is it's very weird, and it's getting weirder. The insularity of it is becoming, that's why they sound so weird. There was a woman in the United States. She tried running for president in what did she run? Was that in 2016? Yeah, she was one of the idiots who was on the stage initially in 2016 for the Democrats. And she spent her whole life, upper middle class, pampered woman. She was in Congress or something like that. And she shows up in like Youngstown, Ohio to her first campaign stop and starts lecturing people about their pronouns. I mean, it's a working class, it's a rough, tough working class town, it used to be like a steel town. And these people are really suffering, and they're all looking at each other like, who is this weirdo, and why is she in our school talking about pronouns?
I know who you're talking about. Lindsey Graham.
No, this was a woman. Oh, different woman. Yeah, but I mean, well, Lindsey Graham's a perfect example. He will bang on about this Russia stuff, and to him it makes perfect sense. Yet no one who votes for him gives a crap about Russia or Ukraine or any of this kind of stuff. They just no interest whatsoever. And it's this huge divide that's growing between the managerial elite and the rest of us. What's happened is that the administrative class and the managerial class has become this insulation, this layer around them. And to some degree, it's, I said earlier that they hated Trump because they confronted a man who had a job. Because Trump, if you watch videos of him, and I remember when I was a young man, Trump making himself famous, he was a guy who would walk onto a construction site and all the hard hats loved him. Yeah, he could talk to them. He could talk the language, because he knew. He grew up around that stuff. He knew exactly what, how a building was built. And that kind of sort of earthiness, it does not exist anymore. And it's even true in our C-suites. I don't know how, you're a younger guy, so you might not have as much exposure to C-suites, but there are times when I get around these people, I'm like, man, this is like being on another planet. This is just so weird.
Yeah, it's wild when you're actually around them. And how, I said this recently that I'm at an age where no one really impresses me anymore. And some people say that sounds sad. I'm like, no, like I've been in the room with these people and sometimes they can have some good ideas, but a lot of the time they seem so disconnected. And actually, you had mentioned Donald Trump, another example that is more from my world I find interesting. A lot of people don't like him, but Elon Musk. And I think what he was doing at Twitter was very fascinating because I work very, very closely with a lot of these social media platforms. I don't like any of them, but me and my wife, we work very close with them. And the gambit he was doing by going to Twitter and laying off all these people, a lot of people thought he's trying to destroy Twitter. Well, it turns out Twitter's not destroyed, first of all. Okay. Second of all, that had never been done before. You have to understand how bloated every single tech company is. You have to understand. And I've known people who work at Twitter, at TikTok, at Twitch even. And there's like tens of thousands of them that are just known as product managers. And a product manager, their entire purpose is to be a liaison between the platform and advertisers. They're just this sort of middle glut. And what he went in was, he came in and said, let's try and get rid of all these people who don't really do anything. And I know a lot of people I went to school with who got laid off. I'm like, well, you didn't really fucking do anything. You had an office and you talked to Pepsi every day. But he's saying, can we just do this in a more streamlined way? And I told people thought that was crazy, but I told them, I'm like, every single tech platform right now is watching to see if Twitter goes under, because if they don't, you just taught Facebook that can lay off 50,000 people. And then they did. And so did Amazon. Yeah. Amazon's a bit different because they're losing, locations and stuff. But, they've never been done. They never just got, same with the HR industry. The first big company that fires its entire HR department and doesn't go under, it's like, that's going to set a real exciting precedent, I think.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. I mean, I have a story when I was a young guy starting out. I have certain stories I like telling. It's funny. My stories are never about me. My stories are always about something that happened to me, and that's why I like telling them, because they still feel fresh to me. But anyway, I'm increasingly becoming an old guy in that regard. But anyway, I just really my first indoor job, and I'm working in a finance department, and I was a little bit out of my element, and the company, it was pretty obvious. This tell you how long ago it was. My job was to take and convert Lotus 123 spreadsheets to Excel because we're going to convert to Excel.
So I remember Lotus. I remember that.
So, and I could write macros and translate them in both sides. So I was like the universal translator of the finance department. But anyway, so I'm sitting there, I'm reading all the financials of internal financials of the company. I'm like, we're in a lot of trouble. And I remember sitting in my little cubicle thinking, damn, this is my first indoor job, and I'm going to get laid off for sure. They're going to have to fire everybody. Well, sure enough, they did. They wiped out whole swaths of the company. But I kept my job, and my boss, when the layoffs all happened, he grabbed me and he says, look around at all the empty cubicles. And I said, yeah. And he goes, you know what I look at? And I said, no, I don't. He goes, none of those people should have been here in the first place because they're not going to be missed. And I thought, man, what a bastard, right? But he was right. Nobody missed any of these people. Nobody even remembered their names in a week because they didn't do anything. Yeah. They just filled up cubicles. But the lesson though is that the cubicles started to fill back up again. And by the time I left, they were full again.
Yeah, and it's something we discuss on the show a lot. It's a common enough phenomenon for young people these days to work a job, especially if they're in the service, not the white collar sector rather, and they don't really know what it is they do. They know that what their tasks are, but they cannot tell you how they really fit in. The machine's too big. They don't really know. They don't even feel like a cog in the machine. They would be so much better if you knew what part you were. You just feel like you're present in this company, and you send and receive emails. And those jobs are completely redundant. A lot of, my co-host, he's very much a blue collar guy. And he's like, these people don't even need to be there. I'm like, that's true. However, that does present a societal problem when you could effectively lay off 30% of all employed people, right? But that means that 30% of the workforce is fucking useless. And it's just this hamster wheel we need to keep going because as a civilization or as a society, we don't really have enough jobs that matter anymore. So what do we do about that too?
Well, COVID made that point. When we started the shutdowns here in the States, it kind of rolled from area to area. And around here, of course, proximity to Washington, we all of a sudden had the big shutdown. And I mean, we still had an office, and our building, the landlord said, "Hey, look, we were told we have to lock you out." He says, "Sorry, man." I'm like, all right. So we went and worked at home, and I would go out on my bike, and streets were empty. It was great. I mean, I missed that time because it was like being in one of those zombie movies.
I loved it because me and my wife were not supposed to go out. We were out all the time, and I'm like, "This is great."
Yeah, I mean, I was riding down the middle of a 50-mile-an-hour road, on my bike because there's not a single car around. There was nobody around. It was awesome.
People forget that too. By the way, people are rewriting history and acting like that never happened. Sorry to derail you there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be incredible. It won't be too long before when we talk about this, it's a conspiracy theory. Why people making these wild theories up? But but it hit me. I realized that one of my customers contacted me a couple of days into it and say, "Hey, look, I'm sending you over a document that makes you an essential worker because we're going to need you to do stuff." And like, okay, that's no problem. I mean, no big deal. And because I don't really, my manufacturing customers, I have to get into their facilities sometimes. We get on the shop floor and do stuff. So I do need to get out, but generally I can work remotely. But anyway, and I got a few more at this stuff, and I started talking to them. I'm like, how many of your people are you getting these certificates for? And they go, probably about half. And I said, well, what are you going to do with the other half? And a few of my customers said, we're going to think about whether we bring them back or not. When this all blows over, we're going to have to rethink this. And it was pretty obvious that, there were some disruptions and there were some problems. But the truth of it is, as you said, about 30% of the people weren't really needed. We wouldn't miss them if they we would notice them because they'll be loitering on the streets because they're unemployed.
Yeah.
That's it. And, around here, it took a while for the office parks to start filling up again. They slowly have over the last year, but a lot of companies took their time bringing these people back on board. And some of it was the work at home BS and, all that stuff. But I think it's amazing to me that more companies didn't realize that, hey, you know what? Maybe it's time to get rid of the HR department or the training department. There's another waste of money.
Yeah.
Just get rid of it.
Yeah, the HR is almost a cancerous make work program inside of every organization. That
It's amazing. And look, I remember confronting this when I first started out. When I first started working, it was tolerance, and then we quickly moved to we moved from tolerance to sensitivity. That was it. Tolerance, sensitivity, then diversity, and it was obvious then. I mean, I'm in my 50s, so let me see how many back here. Almost 35 years. Yeah, so getting on 35 years. It was obvious that the HR department was nothing but a bunch of hens making trouble in the company. They didn't do anything productive. They actually made it harder for everybody to do their job. And it's only gotten worse. I mean, because they have they're armed with all these tools, and they get to sniff around in your life in ways, with their employees and find out all kinds of stuff about them. It's stunning to me that no one has looked around and said, you know what? Why don't we just get rid of this? And that solves a huge problem.
Yeah. Does this fit in at all with? There's a concept you had discussed on your show. You were discussing the Managerial Revolution, the James Burnham book, and you discussed this concept called the managerial polyarchy. Would you be willing to kind of dive into that for a second?
Yeah, it could be a crackpot idea, but basically, what I kind of landed on is that I've always been a Burnham fan. I started reading about managerialism and the efficiency movement. There was all these guys 100 years ago, at the beginning of the 20th century, who thought, they learned these lessons from the manufacturing world, said, hey, when we systemized our manufacturing, we made it highly efficient. We maximized the labor that we had. And we started doing these things in our offices by, hey, we had people who just did accounts receivable. We had people who just did purchase orders. They started to split their work up and streamline it. Why can't we do this of all of society? And of course, that's the beginnings of the managerial revolution is this idea of managing society. And it's a really critical concept that I think a lot of our guys struggle with because it's not fancy and it's not sexy. They'd rather, think about other topics. But, this notion that the guy who owns something, who owns a business, has less power than the management of his company is something that's hard for people to quite grasp. But, you've been in the work world. You've probably seen this. You've been with companies where they have an owner. He doesn't really make a lot of decisions. All the important stuff is done by a management group. There's a CFO. There might be a COO. And these people do this. Well, this is metastasized everywhere in our society, and you see it again. If people who have been in the business world, we recognize how this operates. A guy like Pete Buttigieg, I've seen that guy in the business world a million times. How they manage to survive, it's amazing, really. A completely incompetent person ends up in some position, and no one really knows what he does. And I actually worked with a guy like that, or worked for a guy like that. No one could figure out what this guy did. It was baffling. And he seemed like he was an unusually stupid person, but all the bosses loved him. No one could figure it out. And, it's just a part of, the corporate system. But this is happening throughout our society as you have this class of managers or people who look at themselves as running some segment of society. Well, that's not really a great explanation for what's happening to us. Why things are the way they are. In the United States, no one's voted for open borders. No one's run on their campaign promising open borders. Yet we have all these immigration policies that are obviously in direct conflict with public opinion. How is this happening? Is there somebody in charge who's deciding this? Well, no one can really know. It's very confusing. There's this thing that we all kind of live with. Sort of a model-dependent understanding of the world. We have this model of the world, and we just kind of say, all right, these are the rules, this is how the system works, and we hope that it allows us to make accurate observations and predictions. Drive down the street, model of driving in this country is we drive on the right-hand side, we have certain sign shapes, that kind of thing. And as long as the predictions, the things that we count on work on that model, we accept the model. But our model of democracy is really not working very well. But it's a liberal democracy idea or a Republican democracy or whatever you want to call it, because we're getting these results that shouldn't be happening. It just doesn't make any sense. What's happening is not making any sense. So that kind of got me thinking about think about Burnham a little bit, saying, oh, okay, we have these elections, but the people who are making decisions in the bureaucracy, they're not changing at all. They're staying the same, and they're going to continue doing what they're doing. But there's this guy named Robert Dahl who wrote in the 70s and 80s, and he was really kind of it was Harvard, I think Harvard or Yale, I can't remember which. Yale, I think it was. But anyway, he was a political theorist and political philosopher, and he wrote extensively about democracy. And he really spelled out what are the requirements of democracy. And he pointed out that no large society could possibly have this. Things that you have to have in a democracy, like everyone participates. Well, that's never going to happen in a large society. Everyone has to have the same access to information. That can't happen. Everyone has to have the same ability to understand the policies that are being put forward. Well, that can't happen either. So we went through all this stuff and said, this is impossible. But you can have a democratic ethic. And so we started looking at American political system and said, well, you have the judicial branch, you have the legislative branch, you have the executive branch, but then you have these departments and stuff. Well, what are they doing? Well, they have some democratic elements, elections and so forth, directly or indirectly, but all of them are motivated by trying to do things that are for the general good, or comport with the general will. And that's how he came up with this idea of polyarchy, that, hey, you have these different power centers in the political system, and even though they're not directly elected and it's not democratic, they operate under a kind of democratic ethos to try and approximate democracy. So that was his idea of polyarchy. So I took these ideas and said, well, what if they're not motivated by the general will? What if they're motivated by entirely internal reasons? They're trying to maximize the power of the node in which they're operating. Well, then we take this sort of managerial idea and the bureaucratic ideas and say, all right, now we have managerial polyarchy. We have these different power centers. We have the media. We might have Silicon Valley, Wall Street, global corporations, whatever, the academy. And even within them, you have sort of subsystems in it, but they're not motivated by trying to do what's best for society or trying to determine where public opinion is and comport with it. They're motivated by purely internal things, the same way in which people politic within a corporation. The guy who in the accounting department, they're not as concerned about the accounting as they are with the personal politics, trying to get a favor from the CFO versus the guy over in, purchasing, that kind of stuff. And that's the real dynamic. And so basically we're managed in some respects by almost like a giant HR department, but it's broken up into all these sub departments that have specific domains of power. Silicon Valley controls a lot of information. They don't control all of it, but they control a tremendous amount of information. And so they have real power, but they're dependent on Wall Street, who has money power, but Wall Street needs information power. So there's a codependency between those two nodes. Of course, you have the political node, and they have dependencies on these guys. And so it's almost like a feudal system in a way. I mean, it's kind of a crackpot theory, and I haven't really thought it through completely, but it's this relationship, this interdependencies, these relationships both vertically and horizontally in this ruling class that we have. And that's why voting makes no difference. That's why elections make no difference.
And what's interesting is that sort of middle area. If you're looking at sort of like from a de Juvenilean perspective, if anyone listening recalls our talks on the Italian elite theory, the sort of concentric circles of power. You got the central power, then there's the intermediate power, then there's the periphery where kind of the regular people are. And so what's interesting is just to build on that idea, what's funny about that sort of polyarchy is that middle glut area, they think they're the real America. So when people talk about like a real American, they'll say, oh, Joe Sixpack, Mr. Main Street. But that whole HR managerial middle section, they're disconnected from that lower strata. But they think they're the true Americans, just like the people in Washington, they think they're the real Americans. And the story I had was my wife used to work for, when we lived in a different city, she used to work for government, a municipal government. And what she noticed, and she's kind of like me, she's pretty, edgy and right and stuff, but she had to kind of keep that covered up because she's working around real what my late father would call pinko commie liberals. And so but what she noticed was that they had not only a contempt for the citizenry of the city that they were supposed to be governing, most of them didn't even live in the city. They lived outside of the city and would commute in every morning. And that blew my mind. But then they thought, they would try to put forward legislation and sneak things by. And they had an entire process for, okay, we want to build this here. We have to give ourselves a year-long runway. So we need to make it look like we're asking the public for input. We're just going to pretend like we give a shit, because we don't actually like them, and we're doing this for the greater good. We're doing this for them. But it's just that contempt towards what we might call regular people. But they thought they were the regular people. They thought they were the enlightened ones. And even though they didn't live in the city and they hated people who lived there, they thought they were the true vanguardists of that city. Similarly, if you look at these other higher strata groups, they're like, I bet if you asked everyone in Silicon Valley, if you asked an Indian guy in Silicon Valley who got here 15 minutes ago, he would say he's what America is all about. And we have this going on in every single area. And I'm like, it's so disjointed, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things, one of a theme that I try to emphasize is that, and again, this is, sort of a crackpot theory in the sense that, I haven't really thought it through as well as I probably should have. But, it's one of the things that kind of came to me one day is this idea of, the different aspects of it. There's a polyarchy. I work in models a lot. I mean, I do lots and lots of modeling, and not the runway, modeling, the modeling reality. A big part of what I do in my life is I build models, and a lot of statistical models, but also just different kinds of ways to try and model some bit of reality. And one of the things that when you do this is that you've got to be conscious of the fact that when you're working in the world of model dependent reality, is that your biases will create a problem for you. You'll mistake observations for wishful thinking, and it happens all the time. And you always have to be, it has to be on the front of your mind to prevent yourself from making these kinds of mistakes. And everybody struggles with it. Everyone does. Back during the beginnings of COVID, I did some models. I wrote some things about how do you properly model the COVID stuff. It was funny. All these guys who I didn't realize who actually know something about epidemiology were all over me. We're like, "Oh, this is great stuff." It's finally somebody out there understands the struggles we're having. But anybody who works with models knows this is a huge problem. Well, when you're trying to model what's happening and saying, okay, what are we really living under? What are the rules really happening? It's hard because, well, it's hard to test. And I think, especially for Americans, we've been so intensely conditioned to believe in, voting and democracy and the marketplace of ideas and the marketplace for goods and services and all that stuff. And, we all struggle to break free of that. But I guess the point I'm getting to is that, there's pieces here that I think might fit into that kind of model. The polyarchy idea, I think, is one, but it's also very similar to what happened at the end of the Roman Empire. And it was really obvious in like early medieval Spain and early medieval Italy, where you didn't have really central authority. Yeah, there was some king somewhere kicking around, a Goth or Ostrogoth or Visigoth, I forget which ones it were. I think it was Visigoths in Spain. But they didn't really have power. The guys who ran the city, I think it was Barcelona, was run by Jews. And they actually got to pick the bishop. Think about that.
Jesus.
Yeah. And I mean, I forgot the guy's bishop's name. He was a bishop, and he was warring with some rabbis in like Barcelona and stuff, and constantly going to the king, Relivic or something like that. Well, anyway, but you had these local power centers that had real authority, and the central authority really had to negotiate its power with these guys and maybe play one off the other in order to try and get some advantage. And that was a thing that started at the end of the Roman Empire. And this is, of course, we're at the end of the American Empire. So we're starting to see the kind of same sort of stuff. I mean, who are you really afraid of in the United States? Are you really afraid of the IRS now? Or are you more afraid of Google? I mean, Google has much more authority in your life. If they decide, like they did to Alex Jones, that he's got to go, Alex Jones, I mean, he's got a $1.6 billion penalty hanging over his head. They have real power and can do real damage to you. So, we're starting to see this disaggregation there. So you have this sort of feudal sort of element to it, where you have these different power centers who are working out the relations. So you have the polyarchy idea, but you have managerialism is layered over it. And, so there's a lot of different pieces here that I think we're trying to build a model. If we're trying to build a model of, hey, this is what's really going on in our society, I think there's probably some big missing pieces there. But
I was going to say that's what I liked about Trump, and to a similar extent, Elon Musk, because even though there's a lot of things they do and say that I might not agree with, but I think what they represented, and even people who really hate him now will probably still agree with this, was that he was a shock to the system and forced the system to react in a way that I like. What Trump forced the news media to do is going to go down in history as some of the most insane shit. You had to live it to understand how crazy everyone went for a while, how the entire system was convulsing at this thing that shouldn't have happened. And even though he didn't, enact a lot of the policies people would have wanted, I'm like, well, he showed this system operating in a way that a lot of people didn't think was possible. And similar with Elon Musk. And what the reason a lot of people hate these two guys is because they are, in essence, saying the quiet part out loud, that people who have lots of money and power are supposed to be more Machiavellian and cunning. And then they're forcing other similarly placed power structures to react and quiet them down, thereby showing people like, oh, wait, I didn't know. So the entire news media is against the president? That's not supposed to happen. So I thought at the very least we have an interesting evidence of that.
Yeah, I mean, and this, this is one of those really interesting things too, is that why did the whole system go berserk all at the same time? It was really we want to believe that these people are very cunning and calculating and Machiavellian, but yet the opportunity they had to really solidify their control with Trump in office, they completely pissed away. They could have cut any deals. Trump would have signed anything to be part of the club. He wanted to be accepted. If they were as shrewd and manipulative as we'd like to, we would actually wish they were in a way. We want them to be smart and shrewd. One of the hard things about a guy like Justin Trudeau, I think for probably a lot of Canadians, is how can someone this stupid get to this position? I mean, what the hell kind of a system is selecting for this idiot? And I don't know if you ever watched the Duran guys. There's a guy named Alexander something or other. He's in Greece, but he was educated in the United States. But what the heck, Alexander, not Mercurius, something other, Constantinopolis or something like that. Anyway, he does this great impression of Justin Trudeau talking to the Prime Minister of Germany. It's just hilarious. But anyway, you can cut that part out when you edit this in.
No, I want to look it up because as you're saying that, I'm looking it up. I'm like, Alexander Constantinopolis. I'm trying to find him.
I don't know. Some kind of Greek name. Actually, I can tell you right now. Let's see. What the heck is his name? Alexander something or other. Alexander Christoforo.
Okay.
Christoforo. He's part of one of the Duran is their sort of main hangout. And they do a lot. They do all this Ukraine stuff and all that. And
okay,
they're kind of interesting.
Yeah, I see here. Good. Yeah. I'm going to look into him because I hadn't heard of him before.
Yeah, and the one guy, his partner Mercurius, he's got an interesting speaking style. Just I'll leave it at that. But anyway, kind of lost my train of thought here. But the thing is that that Washington could have gotten sweetheart deals out of Trump. They just had to give him some crumbs, but they couldn't. And the reason is, again, it goes back to this sort of model. They had this vision in their heads. And this is, kind of serious stuff, because the reason that America is in a crisis right now is that 30 years ago, the ruling class all came to the same conclusion that Fukuyama was right. This was the end of history. All the moral questions have been answered when it comes to politics and economics. Now it's just a question of implementation. They have been operating under that belief. They defeated the Pat Buchanans and the Ross Perot's and the Paleocons and all these guys who criticized the project. Those guys had all been swept aside. And then Trump comes along and wins an election. And that should, their worldview, their logic of the universe said that was an impossibility. And yet it did happen. So that meant that the logic of the universe was no longer valid. And that's why I started calling him the mule. I don't know if you read much science fiction when you were young, but there's these Isaac Asimov wrote this series of novels called the Foundation series.
Yeah.
And in the first book, they have this character. It's called the Mule, the Destroyer of Worlds. And the reason he's a destroyer of worlds is that the logic of the universe says he shouldn't exist. So the fact that he actually exists means that the logic is flawed, and that means everything they understand about the world must be flawed. And of course, it calls everything into question. And that was Trump. He was the mule, and that's why they couldn't make a deal with him, because it'd be kind of like, it'd be like if a unicorn or a leprechaun shows up at your door and is trying to sell you insurance. No matter how good a deal it is, wait a second, I'm not going to buy insurance from a leprechaun. You shouldn't exist.
It's a glitch in the system, and I can't make a deal with someone if I can't really understand. That's like a game theory thing too. Like, I can't really work with you if I don't understand you, or like you're not supposed to have something happened here. So they're like, okay, everyone stop what you're doing. We got to figure out what happened here.
Yeah, and they don't really seem to have recovered from it. I mean, they're trying to put a guy. He's on trial right now. I went to the jury, and I guess the jury is hung as of today. They're going to put him in jail for he was said mean things about Hillary Clinton on Twitter. This is no joke. I mean, he made these hilarious jokes about Hillary Clinton back in 2016, and he's been arrested, and he's facing 10 years in federal prison for basically being funny. And they there's no reason to prosecute this guy. It's been 7 years. They could just forget about it, but they can't let it go. They're trying to put Trump in jail. He wrecked the system, and they've never been able to recover. And we've been wobbly ever since. And it's a good thing, I think, in a way, because I think it has kind of caused a lot of people to wake up. One of the things I've started talking about recently is, escaping the 20th century. We need to close the door on all that stuff. Let's try to live in, it's 2023 now. Let's stop talking about the 1980s. I mean, I was alive in the 80s. It was a great time. Clothes were not that good looking. Music was hit or miss, but it was fun. The economy was good, and, it was a nice time. But I don't want to go back to that. I don't want to. Yeah. I want to live in here and now, and make the most of this time. I think a lot of people are getting that.
I had a question for you. Returning to just what we talked about sort of this end of history Fukuyama way of that they believe that the world's operating in. How much does what we might call leftism still? How present is that in there? Because you had made an interesting point on one of your more recent podcasts about how paleoconservatism as a movement was infested with Marxists and leftists. And you had said also that a sort of leftism intellectual movement was the only exciting intellectual movement in the kind of mid to late 20th century. And it attracted some of the minds. It was the only kind of edgy thing. Do you think that's still present? And is leftism still kind of the uniquely attractive to intellectuals?
I think we right now we're in an intellectual dead space, at least in this country, and I think in Europe as well. I've spent enough time in Europe, and I've been around enough European nationalists, a lot of those that scene, and I have a decent number of European intellectuals will email me every once in a while, and the read that they'll say is that the only interesting things that are happening are people who've all been fired from their jobs and get together on their own. That's where interesting conversations now happen. You cannot have an interesting conversation in an institution, and that's, I think, true here. You just cannot question orthodoxy at all in anything. You can't talk about crime. You can't talk about humanity and all human diversity at all. You can't talk about obviously geopolitical stuff that's become monolithic. Everyone has to have the same opinion. There really isn't much interesting going on. I mean, but I think outside of the dissident swamps, I know I get emails from people. I call them daywalkers. I have these. They're the college professors who listen to my show or read my stuff, and they'll zip me an email and they'll say, "Oh, I really like this, but please never ever mention that I know you." and I'll laugh like, "Don't worry, I get it," and I'm not. That's fine. You're not hurting my feelings with this stuff. And but it's what they'll say is that in their day life at the university, nothing interesting happens because everyone's afraid to have a conversation, so it can't. You have to go outside of it. So I think, I don't think we have a left or a right. We probably really didn't ever have a left and right in America. And Canadians had real socialists. I remember when I was a young guy, one of my friends was going to McGill. He was a graduate school at McGill.
Yeah.
And I went up to see him, And we went to like some graduate seminar thing, and you had these people arguing about the finer points of Marxism and socialism. That never happened at an American university. And you guys had some real genuine leftists, and because you had that whole weird thing in Montreal. Are you, which side of Canada are you? Are you an Anglophile or the?
Well, I am an Anglophone, but I unlike other Anglo guys, I don't hate the Francophones. I don't have any ill will towards Quebec because usually, like, I know people in my family who just hate French Quebec people. I'm like, I really love it, Quebec. Go in there; it's one of the best places to go. So, but that's rare in this fucking country.
Yeah. I mean, it was funny because I spent a fair amount of time in Montreal and in Quebec, and Montreal was a great city. It was one of those places. If you lived in New England too, especially younger people, you'd go over the border because you'd go party in Montreal, and it was relatively cheap compared to the U.S. And and it was also back in the days when you guys had like a $12 a pack cigarette tax. You could finance your trip into Montreal, but you'd fill up. We'd rent a minivan and we'd fill it up with cigarettes.
Yeah.
And we drive over the border, and you were making like $5 a pack of smokes.
That's one of the reasons I had to quit smoking all those years ago, because it really is that they're trying to price everyone out of smoking up here.
Yeah, it was crazy. There was actually cigarette boats. Those speed boats that you see like in Miami. They were going across the Great Lakes hauling cigarettes into Canada. But no, I mean, on the university campus, you had genuine, sort of radicalism, or the old sort of 20th century and even 19th century radicalism that really never existed in America. And I don't really think we have a left and a right anymore. What passes for the right is just really, it's the granny in the back seat telling the driver to slow down. I mean, that really is all it amounts to. But even the left itself, I mean, all this gingerbread with the insane people, men in dresses and all that stuff. The important things, everybody agrees. The consensus is there's going to be open borders. There's going to be, literally a borderless world. Ruled at the top. The Pax Americana is going to cover the whole planet. China will be an industrial park. Russia will be the gas station. We'll eventually use North Africa and the Middle East for raising food in South America. That's kind of as a vision they have, and they all agree on it. So, I mean, there really isn't functionally a left and a right in the classic sense anymore, even if there was one.
What's interesting is I think what my good friend Thomas77 would call this thing of ours. One thing we'll notice people always sort of complain about on the dissident right is that it's too much infighting, too much complaining, no one gets along. And I see that as a feature, not a bug. I actually find that very stimulating. But it does seem sort of like you had mentioned, the coalition of the fired. And what I notice about our side, it does seem like there's two hemispheres to this, and there's no left and right, but there's like the kind of, the trannies and all that. Then there's us, the ones who are actually fired for what they say. And even on our side, the reason it may be, and I'm kind of working through this as I say it, but it might be uniquely interesting to intelligent and ambitious people, because this side, as far as I can tell, is the only side that's talking about these issues in a serious way. For example, open borders. Like, let's say, like you said, people are convinced it's going to happen. The people who are advocating for it, I don't even think have thought about it all the way to the bottom. And there's people on our side. For example, there's an individual that I have a lot of issues with. Probably has no idea that I exist, but whatever. Richard Spencer. While I may disagree with him on many points, what I can say is that when I do kind of tune in, and he's not just saying the worst shit imaginable on Twitter, at least he seems like a guy who's trying to work through this problem all the way to the bottom. He's trying to say, okay, if there is going to be, where are white people going to go if this is going to happen? I'm convinced this is going to happen. What are white people going to do on a global stage? And I don't see that sort of inquiry happening, even for the people who are advocating for it to happen. They're just like, yeah, we'll open the borders, and it's the right thing to do. It's like, no, think about what happens the year after that, 5 years after that. So if you're the type of person who likes to think about things, I think this thing we got going over here could actually attract a lot of interesting and connected people in a way that I don't think that other side could. Now, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, all the interesting. I mean, look, we certainly have on our side some eccentric characters for sure. There's no question about that. And look, I'll put myself in there because I can be difficult, and I understand that, but the fact is that most of the people on our side are very smart. That's one of the things that when I started writing 10 years ago, and at first I honestly I didn't really expect to make much of it at all. I just thought, I'll screw around with this and we'll see what happens. And I wound up, stumbling on to I forgot what happened. It's one of those things where I don't know, the spirit hit me. I wrote this essay. It had something to do with Rome. I don't even remember anymore. And I get an email from a college professor. And he thought about it. It was a thoughtful email. I'm like, wait a second. This guy's a smart guy he's written books on this subject. How in the hell did he stumble onto me? And it got the wheels started spinning on his head. Like, wait a second. How do I stumble onto some of the people I read? There's a lot of us out here. There's a lot of people out here. And that really is wow, I wound up writing these daily essays of 1,000-word essays. Like, you know what? I'm in that audience. I bet you there's lots of people in this audience. And sure enough, there's a big audience for this stuff. Because if you're a smart white guy in America, you've got no place professionally. You can go and do the thing that you naturally want to do, and that is be curious. You're not allowed to be curious at all. You're not allowed to think about stuff. And so we've got this great dispossessed of honest talent, very eccentric in many cases. And I think a lot of people who get into this kind of politics are always going to be kind of lonerish, that kind of thing, a little ornery. But it's vibrant. It's exciting. I mean, when I write something and I read my comment section, I'm often looking at the comments and thinking, I wish I had said that. That's much better than what I wrote, and because there's a lot of really good people. And in the end, human capital is the deciding factor. You can't escape this. If you take two people who have a 150 IQ and put them together, they're going to produce more than 10 people with a 75 IQ. I mean, it's just a fact of life, and it's the difference between amperage and voltage, so I think that's one of the things that keeps me optimistic.
I like that. I like that thing you just said. It's the difference between amperage and voltage. I'm going to steal that. Yoink.
Yeah, it's one of those things. There's the other thing too, is that if I said something like that at American Enterprise Institute or at Heritage, they'd all be looking at it. It's like, what the hell is that guy talking about? Somebody turned. I mean, they had no idea. They would no idea at all, because these are not people who have ever taken a science class or anything like that. I had a back and forth with Michael Anton a month or two ago. I forget what it was, and I'm using concepts from theoretical physics to talk about models of the universe, and he completely has no idea what I'm talking about. And I realized as I'm kind of going through this is that this is a guy who's never probably cracked a science book in his life. He just don't know. He popped out of a philosophy department, and that's all he knows. And then that is pretty much the totality of the people on the other side. They know their political science. They've memorized what they're supposed to memorize. They're not curious. They don't enjoy debate. I think really one of the things about our side is that we do kind of like fighting. We would like those in our arms. And I know I'm a Gen Xer, and when I get into events, guys my age will always end up talking about how much fun we had in the early days of the internet. Back in the early days, like with Usenet, you would spend a fair amount of time at your work, because that's where you had internet access, going back and forth, calling some guy every name you could think of. I mean, just horrible things you would say to somebody who you didn't know on the internet, because you were arguing about something about baseball statistics, and you knew that if you got them pissed off, you would win the argument. So that's what you were trying to do, is piss them off. And you would just spend, hours doing this kind of stuff. And it was fun. It was a fun time. And I think, that's a thing that white guys like. White guys like being curious and fighting. That's just it. I mean, that's that white guys like being curious.
It's steel sharpens steel.
Yeah, it's the Star Trek, the first series. We want to go to strange new worlds and have sex with their women and kill them.
And this is what I would always tell people, because I would get interested in stuff like conspiracy theories and stuff, just because Well, why wouldn't you? I mean, it's
Exactly.
even if
I was thinking the same thing. Why not?
even if I don't agree with it, like I'm not a flat Earth guy, but I'm like, there's guys over here who are talking about the Earth is flat. I want to hear about that. Don't you? Who doesn't want to hear about this shit? Who doesn't want to
Yeah.
hear about UFOs and stuff? But the same thing with a lot of these big ideas. I'm like the world. This is so much more fascinating than whatever the fuck is going on anywhere else. And I don't know. That seemed obvious to me, but not obvious to everyone. Certain
Well,
others.
there's another. I think there's another thing too on our side is the willingness to be wrong. Like we were talking about this managerial polyarchy idea, and I fully admit I could be barking up the wrong tree, but I'll write about it. I did a show on it. I'll come back to it more than once, and at some point I might, somebody might say to me, "Look, this is stupid. Why do you keep talking about this?" You're right. It is, but it's that's how you learn, though. That's how you get better. Is you keep trying things, and that's another weird thing I've noticed about in my corporate experiences, when I go into these places, particularly the younger people, they're all terrified of being wrong or being seen to be wrong and taking any risk. It's the
Yeah.
weirdest thing. The risk adversity is just, I find it off putting, frankly.
We were talking about this before the show. We were talking about how the younger generation generally seems to be, might be related to the incel thing, but that's kind of a different can of words to open. But generally, younger people find it a lot more difficult to talk to girls or to engage with them. And to me, like I said before the show, when I was in my late teens, early 20s, it seemed obvious that as a young man, you got to be go out trying to get laid, get girls, get a girlfriend, whatever it might be. And then again, it was obvious that how do you do that? Well, it's trial and error. It's just like learning any fucking skill, just like going to the gym, just like learning to drive. It's like, well, it's going to suck for a while. And like I just had my first son was born just the other day, and I knew like this is a steep learning curve, and it's going to be bad for a while. But then you're going to get good at it, and it's good to get good at it. But like you had said, there's a fear of failure. And to me, when I work in business development and things like that, especially with startups, there's that book called The Lean Startup, but there's a startup mentality where you always want to get the minimum viable product for a new piece of technology. Don't make this big complicated thing. Try and test market the most stripped down version of that to test your own assumptions. And it's going to fail. It's probably going to fail, but it's important to fail as fast and as cheaply as possible just to like reveal certain things. So you almost become addicted to failure because you're at least getting out there, you're getting some scars and bumps, but that's called wisdom. And so in maybe a more advanced way, it's like you have people who are afraid to acquire wisdom through trial and error, and that's very scary to me.
Yeah, and I don't. It's shocking to me, and I guess I think maybe we were before we were recording, but my first experience of it when my friend was at doing graduate work at Yale, and we, we both he and I are drinking men, and so so and the best part was he was there as a seminary student. So, we're being a priest walking to a bar. But anyway, so we start drinking with him, and and of course at a certain point we're playing matchmaker, saying, look, that woman, she's too tall for you. She'll never respect you. This one, that kind of stuff, And these guys, I mean, it was funny, they got a few drinks in them and they started to kind of be normalized. I think, just kind of took the edge off for them. But, talking with them in the evening, we're having that late night sort of graduate students, stuff. And, they had all the bits to be normal. It's just they weren't conditioned to be normal. They had spent so much time, particularly at that level. You're talking about elite of the elite students. They had went to elite prep schools. They had went elite, undergrad, that was the focus of their life, and they had to kind of work within the system. But the bits were still there for them to be normal. But what was striking to me about it is how fearful they were, because the difference between being a Yale graduate student and being a University of Connecticut graduate student was so narrow in their minds. So it's a small difference. They made one mistake. Instead of being at Yale, they're at UConn, and who wants to be there? That's like going to Fred's University or something. And we were talking about this. I said, you guys have to understand something. Nobody gives a damn about your diploma 5 years after you're into the workplace, unless you're in the academy. Nobody cares. I mean, other than, again, if you're in the workplace and you're socializing, and you tell a story about going, your college days. Where did you go to college? Oh, I went there. Oh, really? I knew somebody who went there. And then you move on.
Yeah.
That's the end of it. But I think it has a lot to do with this. The middle class angst, this fear of somehow or other they're going to fall down the ladder and end up, poor. And especially at a place like Yale. Yale, I don't know how much have you traveled in the United States at all?
I've only been to a few places. I went to DC.
Okay.
I went to Vegas. I haven't been to New York even, but yeah, a couple places.
Well, like Connecticut, it's just like a big suburb for the most part. You have all these old smallish sort of cities, and where Yale is, it's called New Haven, and it's on the top of a hill. Really nice neighborhood, all these nice white people and Asians, and all the elite college experience. Down the hill is a ghetto, a black ghetto, and the cops all sit at the top of the hill to make sure that the black ghetto stays where it is. And I always think that the reason that these not all universities like Harvard doesn't have this problem, but I always thought that these kids at Yale had this angst because they could just look down the hill and say, if I make a mistake, I'm at the bottom of the hill. I don't want to be like that.
Yeah, it's like South America. It's like the favelas are right next door to the mansions.
Yeah, that was one of the wildest things I ever learned when I first time I went to Mexico. Is that the further up the hill you were, the better off you were. And I'm like, it actually there's a logic to that. It just actually makes perfect sense. But as an American, we're conditioned to believe that we don't have classes and anybody can be rich and all that stuff. And like, you know what? The Mexicans got the right idea. If you'll never get up the hill, you won't waste your life trying to do that. You'll go find some other ways to make yourself happy.
Yeah, there's a sort of a liberation in the caste system revealing itself, because that it implies that if you're not a millionaire, well, then you're just stupid. Can you be a middle class or poor person and also smart? I've got a lot of people in my circles who would say no. If you are poor, you're stupid. I disagree with that, but it's a common enough belief, more common than you'd think for people. Like, yeah, everyone is exactly where they should be financially.
Well, I tell you, look, I grew up poor, and I will say that most people are poor because they make poor choices. That's certainly true. But in America, there used to be a way to select people out of poverty. When I was a young guy, you got tested all the time in grammar school. Every year you had standardized tests. And if you excelled on those standardized tests, you got pulled out and tracked into, hopefully get you into college or something like that. There was definitely an interest in doing that. It's kind of fallen away now. So it's hard to know, whether we really do have a lot of competent people in the lower classes. I think, the working class, there's a weird thing happening in America, and that a lot of white guys, and I've run into this a few times now, have said, I don't want to go to college because I don't want to work in an office. I'd rather go be a tradesman where I can make a very good living and I don't have to put up with all this other stuff. So that may be kind of what's happening. The plumber is actually smarter than the lawyer, but
yeah,
that kind of stuff.
It's common enough. People have noticed it, and I've heard a few of influencers mention it before. But the idea of the university transitioning to essentially a credential mill, and that now that's the purview of credentially oriented people, like the HR people we're talking about. So it's only for people who want, like my family. I come from a family of fucking bureaucrats. Canadian bureaucrats. And the common thing to say was like, just go to school and get the piece of paper, and that's all you need to do. Get the piece of paper and then you'll be set. And that I heard that my entire life. And I think you're going to witness a lot of, it's happening now, a lot of the top intellectual people who, there's still going to be like Yale guys who are very, very important, but there's a lot of a surprising amount of intellectual people who are saying like, what, this credential doesn't mean a lot to me. Are there ways to seek fame, fortune, recognition, and status outside of this system? And I think increasingly, Yale and Harvard are always going to be Yale and Harvard, and Stanford and MIT are always going to be that. But there's a whole lot of other universities that are just going to fall way the fuck off. And there might be some parallel, place for status and wealth-seeking people, as a lot of these other universities fill up with just diversity quotas and shit.
Yeah, I mean, there's a short story from the '50s I always refer to. It's called "The Marching Morons," and I'm not sure if you're familiar with it,
No,
but
but I like it
you know,
already.
yeah, well, it's free online. If you just Google "Marching Morons" as a PDF, you can get. And but basically, the gist of the story is this: this guy in the 1950s, he's a salesman. He's like a great salesman, and goes to get to the dentist. They put him asleep, and he wakes up in like the 25th century. He's in the vast future, and he suddenly, he gets woken up and he gets oriented. He starts figuring out what's going on, and he's puzzled because all the people in charge are idiots. They're all stupid people, except for this one guy. This one guy seems to really be on top of things. And eventually it's explained to him that, well, there's a tiny number of really smart people who run everything. But there's so many of these idiots, they had to give them all these positions of authority and make them pretend that they're in charge of things. So, but the reason they woke him up is that they did their research and they found out he was the best salesman of his era. And their plan was they're going to sell all these idiots free trips to Venus. And they're going to come up with some way to do this and launch them all into space. And so he comes up with this great idea, and all the stupid people, they all take their trip to Venus and they don't come back. And so finally,
I was going to say, it almost sounds like a precursor to the Scientology mythology as well.
Yeah. Well, and the last of the story ends is that the guy's all proud of himself. He finally got rid of the last moron, and his mentor, the guy who helped him along, who woke him up and all this stuff, says, "Okay, now here's your ticket." And they launch him into space, and but I mean, but the way he describes it, that's the world we're starting to live in now. You're seeing like one competent guy in a company, and there's all this periphery. These people who no one really knows what they're doing or why they're doing it, but they're there. And really, the guy who's actually doing the work, he's not getting much of the credit for it. The guy who looks good on the brochure gets the credit. The diversity hires and all this stuff. And at some point, though, those people who are actually doing the work, they are going to say, well, you know what, I can do something else. They're going to have choices. I mean, the world isn't going to change to such an extent where we can get by without competent people or with punishing competent people. Yeah, I think that's really, that's still like because what's happening for boiling off all these smart white guys out of the corporations. They're going to do something. They're going to find some way to busy themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I'm a good example of this. I mean, look, I've been out on my own for over 20 years, 23 years, something like that. And I found a way to make it work. I get to live the lifestyle that I want.
Something I'm keenly interested in is finding options for those people. And I know there's been a lot of people on our side, especially in the more aggressive white nationalist sphere, who were kind of pioneering that white strike thing. And, I wasn't thrilled with that because I'm like, well, that's just relinquishing power. But then you actually saw recently the U.S. military, especially the Army, do an about face and try to desperately hire. And I know some guys who've taken them up on it, they're trying to get the white guys back, basically, because no one knows how to do anything there anymore. And I'm looking at that, I'm thinking, you know what? I wish there's going to be a lot of people who do return to the fold once the system admits its mistake and has to look at the numbers. But I'm like, I wish we were presenting those skilled people with more options to not feel like they have to go back into that system, because it will likely betray them again. It'll likely cast them out or disparage them or oppress them once again. I'm like, I feel like we're missing the boat, or there's like a window of opportunity where these highly competent people are in the wind and they can be snatched up and brought over to something more interesting. And, we're just not, making hay while the sun is shining on that. And that's kind of just a tangent, but I don't know.
It's happening, but in quiet ways. I was at an event last fall, and secret handshake event. No one knows that we're meeting. And one of the things that was done was a breakout session to talk about how do you live outside the system and still have a life. And I can talk about this particular person because I do know them as a good example. She's on my site. Is Above Time Coffee. They were organic farmers in Indianapolis, and they got more hardcore after what happened to them, but they were pretty much just sort of, edgy, normie sort of world. But then Antifa found out that they were kind of edgy and destroyed their business, started picketing them at, and tried to ruin their lives. And they sat down as a family, as a husband and wife and a whole passel of kids, and they had a farm, and they realized, okay, we can sell some stuff online, but they came up with making coffee. The husband had actually worked at a coffee place that actually cooked the beans or whatever, however you make coffee. You take roasting, right, bean roasting.
Yeah.
And he, there's a craft to it, and they wound up creating this company, and they sell coffee, and they, mostly word of mouth and all that, and they're being able to pay their bills, and there's a lot of that happening. Like the people I put on my site, they're people I know, and I've know their story, so I help promote them. And at this event, there was a lot of people talking about this. Hey, this is what I did. This is how I made a go of it. There was a guy who's in real estate in rural areas. He's like, I found out that I can buy a house for 25 grand or a double wide trailer, and the rent is actually paying twice what the mortgage is, that kind of stuff. So it is starting to happen. People are starting to talk about it. I did a show on this last year about what it's like to be a small businessman. I got tons of feedback. Tons of people were like, yeah, this is what I'm working on. And I'm going to probably do a follow-up on it this year for that reason, that there's just a ton of interest in this. It's a hot subject. A lot of people, who fit our demographic profile, are looking around and saying, particularly family guys, guys are like, look, I don't, they don't want their kids exposed to a lot of this stuff. They're thinking in those kinds of terms. And so I think it is happening, but I do think you're right. A lot of people will just go, they'll take the blue pill and go back into the blob. But
well, I'm glad to hear that these are happening, and that there's, because it's very easy for people, and this is why I recommend people would tune into your show. It's very easy to feel, disconnected and feel like you're the only one who's talking about this or thinking about this. But in fact, there are organizations and meetings and groups all over the country, America, Canada, and elsewhere, of people trying to work through these problems. And I encourage people. 2023 is a big year. I hope more people, especially in our audience and listenership, will make more attempts to network with each other. We've talked about this before, about the necessity, because I think the online space will become increasingly hostile to the point where it might be that meeting up is the only way to do anything anymore. But to explore that idea of actually trying to break out in the real world and make real networking relationships and essentially discuss what you're just talking about.
I'm a big fan of secret societies. We need more of them, and just general fraternities. When I was a kid, my dad went to, I always forget that it was an elk or moose, or I don't know, it was an animal. He belonged to the club, and every man did. They all belonged to some. He belonged to this club, and every Friday he'd drop off his paycheck, and he would go down for a couple of pops at the club and play cards or pool or whatever. Once a month, they had a family deal where everybody went down to the club. You bring your wife and your kids or whatever. But it was a fraternal organization. Now, in the United States, they've all been banned. You can't have a men's only club, at least not publicly. But those were wonderful things, because what happened at those places is that, hey, I'm having this problem. One guy says to another, oh yeah, I had that problem too. This is what I did and it worked, or this is what I did, it didn't work, so don't do that. That kind of stuff. And these simple sort of social organizations are really, they're the connective tissue of any society. And we've lost that in America. And I would say it's probably true in Canada as well. And we need to start thinking about rebuilding those. And the simplest way to do it is, if you know people in your area, is somebody's going to say, hey, look, guys, we're going to make a commitment. Every Tuesday, we're going to get together, and we're going to try at least once a quarter to find somebody we can bring into the fold. There's one guy who will join our group, and you start doing that. And it's a rewarding thing. When I go to events, I'm always invigorated when I'm there, mostly because everybody's normal. It's so great to be in a room full of people who are not crazy. They're just normal people, and not having to worry about them being crazy. That's the thing. This is something, it was one of those things, I couldn't put my finger on it. I was at American Renaissance back in November. And it's a great event. It's a fantastic event. It's you have some speeches. It's mostly socializing. You have a few drinks. You have some food. It's very casual. It's very safe too. The way it's set up, you don't have to worry about Antifa or that kind of stuff. And you go to this event, and you're relaxed in ways you can't be relaxed anywhere else. You can say whatever you're thinking without doing that look over your shoulder business, or thinking about where am I, or using funny euphemisms. But it hit me. my Twitter account got reinstated a couple weeks ago, and I'd been banned for over 5 years, and then suddenly it came back to life. I'm like, okay, whatever. And I went, back on Twitter. I was never really a big Twitter user, and I use Gab for joking around with the people I know on, who are also on Gab, but I don't do a lot of that. So, but I went on Twitter, and one of the things I realized is that, hey, I have to be careful what I'm going to tweet, and I never do that on Gab. Gab, I can just let it rip and say whatever I want, and don't have to worry about it because it's the normal internet. It's the way the internet was supposed to be. And I'm like, you know what? That's the difference. I want to live in a world where I don't have to pull my punches. You know what I mean? I could just be normal and not have to worry about some lunatic trying to impose their morality on me.
Yeah.
And you can do that in social societies where you say, this is a closed society. We're only going to be normal people. The weirdos, sorry, you might be a nice guy, but you can't be one of us because this is a weirdo free zone. And
I agree completely. And my experience with Twitter was very much the same. And this is why I like Telegram so much. A lot of people don't like Telegram, but I actually like it because it's not the most intuitive platform. There is a steep learning curve. If you just download Telegram and put it on your phone or your desktop, it's not obvious what to do with it. You really need to put the time in and kind of network and figure out where you go and listen. And then you get invited to other chats. But when I would go on Twitter, because I got it back for a minute, and I was similarly to you, banned just because I was being a reply guy and just messing with people. But I didn't even say like any slurs or anything. But I remember I got back on there. I'm like, I don't like the vibe here. I'm not having fun. I'm not enjoying myself. It's strange and claustrophobic on here. Everyone, even the people I like, have to speak in this fake way. Whereas in Telegram, that learning curve filtered out a lot of the shittier people. So now it's only my people, and everyone talks freely, and you get like a little secret language going. It's almost like as close to an internet secret society as you could get. But yeah, I hated Twitter, and I probably could get back. I just don't see the need to at this point, really.
yeah, it was never really great value to me. I actually did this. I was part of this experiment where I forget what the guy's name was. Some politician was running somewhere. I forget his name. But one of the people in his campaign said, hey, could you write something about him? So I did. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to test their social marketing campaign or whatever it was. So they tweeted it out, and they wanted me to keep track of how many links I got, how many hits I got back. So I'm sure, I was kind of curious too, because I never really got a lot of traffic out of Twitter ever. And Ann Coulter wound up picking up my post, and she tweeted it out. Now she's got 2 million followers. That day, I got 700 link backs from Ann Coulter out of 2 million people.
Yep.
Boy,
not surprised. Nothing. Not surprised, because for years I was telling people no advertiser really gives a shit about Twitter. Oddly enough, now it's probably the best time to go on Twitter, but like up until 15 minutes ago, it wasn't talked about a lot, but everyone knew it was lousy with bots, no engagement. You couldn't make $1 on Twitter. Most companies, if it was just like an extra thing to spend money on, but like it feels fake. It is fake, and even the people around there, I don't know. It's not a good place to like do anything except talk shit, I guess. But it's not. It's not an engaged.
From Gab, I get, I don't know, 10,000 hits a day from Gab.
Yeah,
just because it's normal. It's actual real people. There are no bots on Gab, and it's actual real people. And of course, it's obviously it attracts a certain crowd. But yeah, I use Telegram a lot for that reason. I mean, I belong to a lot of I belong to some Ukrainian channels, some Russian channels. I'm on a Finnish channel, and it's great for that because I got it's narrowcasted. I don't have to. And the nice thing is too, like in the Finnish channel, you have to worry about some lunatic showing up and causing trouble. I mean, it's obviously a very niche audience, but it's I like Telegram a lot for that reason because it's kind of semi-private, really. I mean, I guess that's really what the truth of it is. And you can actually make the channels private. I'm on some purely private channels, and who knows who's looking in on it. My guess is that I think it's a Russian guy who runs it. So is it a Russian guy who founded Telegram?
Yeah, there's some rumors about him because I've known some people correctly pointing out, it's like, what does he get from this? I'm pretty sure it's the founder of VK as well. And this is like a side thing. And no one could figure out how it was generating a lot of revenue. Like you can buy premium stuff now, but there's a lot of people on Telegram, and it doesn't seem like it's making any money. So everyone is thinking like, this is suspicious. I'm not sure I subscribe to that, but there's something there. I think like, what's he getting out of this thing? Because it's not a cheap platform to run, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably using, for the most part, the same sort of chat technology that everybody else uses, like Session and a Keybase is another one I use, and there's some other ones. There was a Signal, that's one.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's one of the things about all these platforms. If you ever peek under the hood, they're almost always the same frameworks, the same stuff.
So I was going to say, I know you probably got to get going soon. And this has been a fantastic conversation. If you had a closing thought, I was going to ask you a question, and we can keep this short, but I think it will relate a lot to what we've talked about this episode. And you mentioned it on your blog recently. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on what we might call the intergenerational war, mainly in North America. And by which I mean, like we were talking about earlier, the millennials complaining about Gen X, and then everyone complaining about the boomers, and the boomers just complaining about Gen Z. And it seems more pronounced, at least to me, it seems more pronounced here than anywhere else in the world, even in Europe, this idea that the generations are almost like political parties in themselves or sports teams, and that we spend so much time like shooting across the lines of age like that. I wonder if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I've always kind of hated generational politics in general. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that in America, if you're in my age group, one of the things that you had to kind of suffer through in your teenage years is hearing all the baby boomers hit their early middle years and reminisce, And everybody does this. When you hit those, like you're in your early 30s, you're something happens to you. I mean, I went through this. You start to realize that you're an adult. You're no longer young, but at the same time, you're not a geezer. You're in that weird middle space where you're starting. It's like your sophomore year. We have I don't know if you guys have this in Canada, but in the United States, we have this. Your second year student, you're a sophomore, wise fool. And that's where you are when you start at 30. You start becoming the wise fool until around my age, where I'm starting to actually lose the stupid parts and just have the wisdom part left. And at least I hope. And but it's just a normal development, especially for men. But when we were young, we were confronted with this giant monolith, this huge body, the demographic. And I think a lot of my generation came away thinking, generational politics are terrible. We don't like being told that we're kids when we're young adults. And, we just don't want to be that way. So it was a little easier for someone my age to be sort of, dismissive of generational politics. I'm much more sympathetic to Zoomers who probably, they had to hear it from both millennials and baby boomers, and of course they the tortured environment of schools and college and so forth. But by and large, only white people have this kind of stuff. You never see black people talk about generational politics.
This is what I've been telling people. Like it's mainly, I don't see this with Asian people either.
No, I mean, Asians, they love their old people. They love their dead people, for goodness sakes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a totally different thing, and the weird thing about it is that you'll have, I always love this, you'll have commercials in the United States where you'll see an old black guy, a middle-aged black guy, and a younger black guy, 3 generations of black men. Statistically speaking, you're more likely to see a red-haired, left-handed midget than you are to see that. It's just not going to happen. I mean, but the statistics are where they are. But anyway, that kind of stuff gets promoted. If it was white guys, if they still had white guys on TV here, the old guy would be his role would be to complain about his son, and his son would complain about the father and his son. It's always this intergenerational war, and it's stupid because look, I really like talking to baby boomers. I get together with a group of these guys who are mostly retired now. They have a lot of fun stories. They're old people are fun. They have funny stories. They have a lot of wisdom. They know a lot of stuff. They're a good source of information. And me, as I get older, I want to be that kind of guy too. I want to be the kind of guy that young people can feel comfortable talking to and say, you know what, this guy, he might be wrong about a lot of stuff, but every once in a while he's right. So go ahead and ask him. He might know. That's great. That's what you should strive to be as a man, as someone who, as he moves through life, that people will start to respect how he's lived and and want to talk to you. Want to pick your brain. Want to take that knowledge that you've accumulated and continue it on and build on it, not just let you take it to the grave. And I think that's what we have to be.
My lived experience with that was, maybe it was last year, a while ago, my grandfather passed away, and he was a pretty connected guy locally where he would live. And, he was part of the secret societies. I think he was kind of a Navy guy early on, but he was a member of, I don't even know what it would be. Like an elk, or I forget it. It wouldn't be an American version anyway. But at his funeral, I delivered a speech, and everyone loved it, and all his friends were there. And that's the thing; he had this whole network that showed up. And would it be terrifying for a lot of the younger generations who would show up at your funeral? Ask yourself that. Anyway, but this guy,
that's a perfect way to think of it.
Yeah, and even my, I think my mom who's there, she's like, there's a lot of experience in this room. Everyone there's like 80, 90, 70. And like, you should go talk to these people. Everybody here's connected. Every single person in this room knows like a judge, can get you a job, they're these gatekeepers of so much information. And if you actually do talk to them, it's so common for our generation to be like, fuck boomers, kill, we joke. It's okay to joke. We all joke.
Yeah.
But also I'm like, I've seen it begin to emerge more over the year. It's like, you know what? Like, go talk to them and see what you can kind of get out of them. Not just wisdom, but also maybe it's advice, maybe it's connections. Show that you're engaged. There's no reason to just treat this entire generation like trash, especially if you're on our side, the dissident right, where you're supposed to be all about your ancestors. You're supposed to be about your people, your folk, family, all that stuff we talk about. But if you ask your average person, they'd want to destroy the last 5 generations of their bloodline. I'm like, you got to square this somehow, and they're not going to love everything you agree with. Sure, you're not going to agree on everything, but it's like, I'm very interested in not, sabotaging ourselves the way we've been,
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And that's one of the things like I really find disappointing with like Fuentes and the Groypers, all this boomer bashing stuff. And they're young and they're supposed to do some of that. But they're falling into the same trap that I think a lot of people have fallen into. And again, it's probably easy for me because of, my generation is kind of weird. It's a small cohort. There will be no like sentimentality about my generation because there's just not enough of us for anybody to sell that crap to. So, we're going to spare people that stuff. But but even so, the joy, like when I went to his events, Nick Fuentes' events, and I was with one of my buddies. We've known each other for 40 years, and he said, I told him, I said, be prepared. You're going to be around a room full of people who are, could be your son. And at first he was like, "Holy crap!" I mean, he's like, "I feel like I'm at a junior high school," but it didn't take long. After a few drinks, he was having a blast. He's like, "Oh, it's so much fun to be around these young people," because he and we had some adventures when we were young, so we have some good stories. And we lived I would say wild life, but maybe, but. So we can do those old guy things. Oh, let me show you my scar, and that kind of stuff. But but it was fun. It was fun being around young people because they got a lot of energy, and really, I think in person we're much better with the generational stuff than we are online. Online amplifies all of our worst attributes, our worst qualities, which is another reason why we need to try as best we can to start building in real life stuff, because that solves a ton of problems. There's a guy, I won't say who it is. There's a person that he wanted to start a public spat with me. And at one point we found each other in the same room and we're having drinks, and we never had a problem since then. Even though we completely disagree on most things, we share the taste in alcohol. We have a good time socializing with each other, even though we are politically not really in agreement. And all of a sudden, all that internet shit stopped. And the guy said to me, he goes, I kind of feel bad about trying to start shit with you online. I'm like, don't worry about it. I get it. I do. Yeah, I told him, I was so tempted, but I held back because I kind of been down the road once or twice before. And that's what in real life stuff. I mean, even just talking like this makes a huge difference. That's the other thing, is that even if you can't get together in real life, you can start a Zoom session. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. And
You
you
know?
know what? I think that is probably the best place to wrap this up at. This has been an absolutely fascinating talk, one of the favorite that I've hosted, in my opinion. And what I want everyone to do right now, if you've liked what we've heard so far, and I'm sure you did, I want everyone to go to the zman.com or the Zman. This might be me being Canadian. It's Z or Z. I'm not sure which one it is. But the zblog.com. Also, if you don't want to do that, check him out on WordPress, thedissident.substack.com, and check out his podcast, which is available on his site. And all his episodes are right there on the site. And there's quite a few. There's a 269 by my last count, and we didn't get to talk about it today. So I recommend people. What I wanted to talk about was one of the things I wanted was your episode on the Troubles in Ireland. So people, do yourself a favor, go listen to that episode 269, Lessons from the Troubles. I think you're going to find a lot in there that is practical to everyone's lived experience. And I just want to say once again, thank you so much, sir, for taking the time.
Oh, thank you very much. I enjoy myself.
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
Alrighty.
All right. Bye.
Do not let the rapists win. Listen and love Blood Satellite.